Welcome to Being Intrepid, where we share practical insights from leaders who are shaping the future of learning and talent. I'm your host, Sam Herring. Over the past 2 decades, I've built companies to help people learn and organizations grow. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by my friend, Brian Miller. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Sam. We go way back. We were just discussing our times together. I remember the times at ATD, at that time ASTD, and our board meetings. So I'm looking forward to the conversation for sure.
Likewise, likewise. Well, I'm gonna do a little bragging for Brian here. Brian has led the talent function at some iconic global companies: Levi Strauss, Adobe, Impossible Foods, and Gilead, to name a few. And across these organizations, he's architected systems that help develop talent and directly contribute to each company's growth. Now, Bryant has recently launched his own consulting firm, Win with Talent, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And he's developed a point of view that I really am excited to unpack with our audience today. And that is that as AI accelerates, skills are increasingly becoming commoditized. Brian and I talked our prep call that, of course, we can literally build skills in Claude, right? We call them building skills.
Right.
So if you can't call that a commodity, I don't know what it is. And so what does that mean for leadership? What are the true human enduring differentiators for leadership? And turns out to be something that, we have not been investing a whole lot in over the years, but Brian has. He's been ahead of the curve on this. And so coming into this AI era, Brian really has a valuable perspective and deep experience. That's the word, experience to share with us. So, Brian, let's dig in. As you've led talent, you've had a particular focus on developing top talent, in organizations for
Yeah.
leaders. And obviously, we talked about the companies, different industries, cultures, stages of growth. Um, Looking back across these chapters, what have you learned are kind of some of the essential ingredients of developing leaders?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sam, and you're right. I've been fortunate to work with some amazing companies across a spectrum. I mean, the
Yeah.
development that I've had the opportunity to lead is from all the way from employee to contractors up to mid managers and executives. Here's the provocation and what you and I would also call first principles thinking. It was the notion of what are the experiences that make folks successful when it comes to employees, leaders, managers. It always came back to that. And the opportunities that I had to lead teams, when we focused on that, we actually focused on the experiences that made a difference. What we
Mhm.
saw was greater impact, more nimbleness, there was resiliency, there was adaptation. That's what we really started to unlock for the companies. Here's the so what. And it took me some time to really learn this. You know, when it comes to learning development, you can get enamored with skills versus
Yeah.
the experience readiness that needs to happen. So for
Mhm.
me, here's how that's different. The skills are what you can do, but it's not about what you survived and who you've become. And when we got that right, that's where we saw really some really great impacts for sure.
Okay. Okay. And I think you were alluding to this or in your answer too, but maybe tell us about your journey as a talent developer. Maybe what are some things that maybe you had some beliefs early on when it came to developing talent that's changed through your experience as a talent developer?
Yeah, my journey really started, and I'm kind of proud of this because I'm not sure I see too many of this happening anymore, which is I started in operations. So my
Hmm.
journey started in learning
Hmm.
operations, running large training buildings way back and
Yep.
really understanding how the ins and outs of training happens. And here's what was grounded in me. Training was about the elegance of the design and the curriculum. Um,
Yes. Yes.
and there was your focus. It was, wow, if you get that right, great things will happen. And as I've put more than 20 years into this craft, everything from talent development, talent management, D&I, TNA, and being a chief people officer, it was a profound sort of insight to understand that our job is to create the context and conditions, not control the curriculum.
Yep.
Uh, better said is the ability to put folks in situations that orchestrate a shared reality to what
Mhm.
matters most. I mean, that's where you really want to get to. That
Yep.
is my journey.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So we in the intro here we've kind of already kind of teed up this challenge of AI skill driving skills is into land a commodity. And I mean, this is a bit of a whiplash, really,
Yeah.
because in the last, 5, 10 years, you could say everything's been skills, skills frameworks, skills taxonomies, skills-based organizations. And now we're saying, oh yeah, skills are becoming commodities. So can you unpack that for us and just to kind of tee up our conversation about what endures for leaders?
Yeah. So you're right. You and I kind of chuckle over this because you're right. The skills-based movement, tremendous amount of investment has been put in place. You have whole companies who are redesigned around this. And here's what I'll first say. It's not bad. It's not something that I would say is a wrong-footed move. It is definitely not. But what's quickly disrupting that is AI. And if we just say it, very bluntly, AI is sort of that disruptive presence that's forcing this conversation about commoditization. Let's just take the obvious off the plate, and we talked about whether it's Claude and skill. Let's just take software engineering off the plate. That
Yeah.
field is currently just under tremendous amount of pressure. And this idea of coding and where that
Yeah.
profession will go. Let's just if we take that just put aside and we gave another more sort of layperson example, you can go to LinkedIn right now, look up job descriptions. I was playing
Yeah.
around looking up VP of talent, talent management, talent development job descriptions in there. And a lot of them will say fluency in Excel. And I looked at that and went, what
What?
is fluency? Fluency in Excel as a
Uh,
requirement.
yeah.
Now you and
Yeah.
I both know. So I have to
Yeah.
be fluent in what pivot tables and
Yeah.
summations
Yeah.
and different formulas. I can literally speak plain language into any LLM and get a pivot table, get an analysis, and get that understanding. That skill, that discrete skill, is quickly evaporating. That's what
Yep.
I mean. That this idea of
Yep.
skills being a durable place right now is quickly being something we have to rethink. So that is, to me, the fine line in skills. Not saying that the ability to catalog, the ability to search, the ability to do the things that we need from a HR process standpoint is not important.
Right.
But boy, if we kind of ground our being and our ability to drive impact on that, I think we'll be sorely missing what's coming next. If we take that to scale,
Yep.
something else you and I were talking about, if you take this sort of if skills are being commoditized at scale, what does that look like? You start to see this cognitive offloading. You
Yeah.
start to see folks really trying to get efficient and all in the sort of I think, rush to be productive, the rush to
Hmm.
generate output. As a
Hmm.
side podcast, one day we'll talk about what that means for compensation and rewards. It is the next conversation that's happening right now
Yeah.
that truly affects talent management and talent development. Compensation and rewards would be the next one. But here's the so what. This cognitive offloading that we start to hear, we're starting to hear research on de-skilling versus not
Hmm.
skilling. Here's what you have to go ahead and say is in these moments, when this happens, who's truly learning? Where is that
Right.
capability happening? Is it
Right.
you or the AI? I think that's going to be
Right.
an important question to ask.
Right. Right. And it's so many interesting questions too about people earlier in their careers, maybe not developing the foundational skills and being at real risk, in competition with the AI or so on, or not building those foundations that allow them to be leaders in the future, being able to
Totally
exercise
agree.
judgment, having that foundational knowledge. So fascinating work there. Okay, so if let's dive into the heart
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Experience. If experience is really the differentiator for the leader, for leader development, like you've posited, that really changes what L&D should be doing. Like you said, it's not just the curriculum and the content, right? It's developing this, as your phrase, this architecture, this experience architecture. So Tell us about that idea. What is an experience architecture for leader development, and share an example for us.
Yeah, so let's all we always do is let's get the definitional points all
Yes.
sort of on the same playing field right now. One is this idea of experiences and how they fight commoditization. I believe experiences are this durable capacity to take and make decisions, to inspire, to create. They are the natural container for what you just said, judgment and discernment. So if we just get that
Yep.
definitional component, if we were to put it into a cool way of thinking about it, a leader who's navigated a very harsh reality of a $400 million turnaround for a
Mhm.
business doesn't become obsolete or less capable when the next LLM update happens. It just doesn't happen. That is a grounded experience. When you think
Yep.
about experience architecture, it has a what and a how. Experience architecture, and it's very straight line. So, what is how do I sequence experience to build capability velocity? That is the framework that I put together. It's like, well, how would we do that? Well, the what of it is, well, and what's the jobs to be done? What are the roles? What's the context layering? Now, this is something that LLMs do that we know. Context layering is we better understand the context of the business, then what
Mhm.
are the experiences? And that to me equals capability velocity. There's the what.
Okay.
So there's your
Okay.
what of the architecture. When we get into how, that's something you and I will talk about. There are the how ways is really grounded into me, and I won't get into the other components around roles and how you build context layering because I think that sits within talent management. We can get into that.
Yep.
And we'll probably talk about that later with the role velocity. But on the experience side, you and I had a good sort of pre-conversation of what would it look like on experiences. We can talk about that's everything from simulations
Yeah.
to paradoxes to storytelling. But that's how
Yeah.
I think about it, experience architecture.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So you've laid out the what, and then let's jump into the how here. So simulations, powerful approach for experiential learning, clearly. I'm curious at the leader level because when our audience hears simulations, they could be hearing everything from tabletop sims, war game situations for corporations to kind of gimmicky e-learning that people call a simulation too.
Yeah.
So when you talk about simulation, maybe talk about what you mean by that and for in the leader development context and why it's such a powerful approach.
Yeah, simulations, they're only as powerful as the stakes they create. So that's the first thing. Simulations are only
Okay.
as good as the stakes that create. And what I believe Sims are so good at doing, they put learners in ambiguity, time pressure,
Mm, mm,
incomplete information. They
hmm.
force an action with consequences. That is different than a straight line teach and do
Yep.
sort of
Yep.
skills approach. And that's my, very crass way of how you can get down the line of skills.
Yep.
It's like teach it,
Yep.
you go do it. So
Yep.
Sims provide that foundational element to actually being able to create this experience velocity. Uh,
Hmm.
a way to think about it is simulations force a learning moment. Uh,
Yep.
and they force, if done right, your ability to really orchestrate an experience. That's what I
Yep.
think is really different about a sim. Now, with AI, here's what we don't have to worry about. You're right. Sims were really at the sort of high level of executive development because of cost.
Yep. Yep.
With technology today, you get a fraction of the cost to put together a sim. Now
Yep.
it just becomes your ability to really think about what needs to be in there. But I really believe Sims are sort of an unlock now for experiences.
Yeah, but the AI side, I'm thinking about my friend Mike Vaughn at Regis, who's kind of gone from creating a sim bespoke, from the ground up to using AI for that. So the great example. You just hit on kind of the point of ambiguity and that it isn't a teach and do. So that's a great kind of segue into talking about paradoxes that, the
Yeah.
days of leaders being problem solvers, just the decider. Should we go A? Should we go B? It's we're talking about your words. It really requires them to manage paradoxes. So, if could you unpack that for us and tell us like how do you design learning experiences around managing paradoxes versus choosing A or B?
Yeah, great question. And you're right. It's the second pillar within the experience architecture is paradox. And it's at such a, I think, different point than what leaders typically grow up with. I
Yeah,
mean, you could sit in a room. We've sat in many of leadership rooms where the first thing that discusses what problem are we here to solve? That is literally the first quotes that come
yep,
out of
yep,
everyone's, mouth around the table. What's the
yep,
problem to solve?
yep.
Rarely do you hear what is the paradox to manage.
Mm,
And that to
mm,
me is when you get to certain levels, it truly is the thing that should be discussed. I often sit in executive rooms and say, only the hard things should come to this room.
hmm.
Really, if we've done our job right, only the hard things come in this room. And
Right.
those things often are paradoxes. It is the ability to hold two rights at the same time. And we've
Hmm.
talked about this. You and I talked about can you hold the right of, being able to go slow yet go fast, to be
Yeah.
able to make quick decisions, but able to socialize as well. The one I love to have leaders grapple with is how do I have conviction with openness? Well, those are
Yep.
paradox moments as
Yep.
well. I want high revenue, but I want great margin. Okay. How do
Yeah.
we get
Yeah.
that done? That is often what I see in great leaders. They can hold both those things at the same time. Now, how do
Yes.
you actually teach that? How do you actually ingrain that
Yes.
into a company? Is that you go ahead and you have to force that moment. Simulations can do that, but here's what
Yeah.
you do you force the moment to take and make a decision, and you see how, and the opportunity there is, did you choose correctly? So there's the moment you create. The debrief, though, is where the
Yep.
magic is in the debrief. The debrief is not about did you get it right or wrong. What was the why behind your thinking?
Yep. Yep.
Tell me the reasoning. Here we go. Tell me your judgment, your discernment. It's not about the decision itself. And that's why I
Yeah.
believe that is where the experience starts to come in.
Yes. Yes. So, and I'm struck by something you said too, this holding the paradoxes of say, conviction and openness. And I'm thinking about times in my own, path as a leader where you have to tell the story to your team about that. You have to lay that out. You have to give a lot of thought to how you're communicating that in a way that is, hey, we're moving in this direction, but we don't know where we're going to land with this. We don't know how the market's going to respond to us. So, good segue to the skills of leadership, and storytelling was one of the big ones. Inspiring followership was another one you named. So, tell us about those skills and why those two particular skills are ones that you think are particularly critical for leaders today.
Yeah, I mean, in this world of AI and soon to be AGI, isolation, and we're seeing the research on this, loneliness, siloing becomes tremendously easier
Yep.
to do. What's
Yep.
hard to do is your ability to inspire people and mobilize. That's
Hmm.
much harder. I mean,
Yep.
you even started to allude to that. The ability for leaders to walk into a room and communicate during ambiguity is difficult. Here's what I believe that the best leaders I've ever seen had something remarkable. They had the ability to have people follow them into uncertainty. I mean, that
Yeah.
is what I've seen. I mean, the ability to have someone follow you into uncertainty. And here is the currency. The currency was believability. And to
Yeah.
me, that is your new sort of anchor for trust.
Yep.
Sam is believable. Why is Sam believable? He's believable because he has my earned trust via the story and what he's lived through. There is
Hmm.
where it really happens. And that to me is the magical moment for leaders. It
Yeah.
is that authentic story, the things that you've gone through that earn that believability that I will follow you when it becomes really uncertain. So to me, that is the pillar. It is the teachable moment. The high stakes moment often is you got to put leaders in front of the room. You got to get them out there. And today's leaders are very nervous about doing that. It's the council culture. It's the, hey, someone
Mm.
can take a screenshot of me. They could record me, Brian. And you see a lot of CEOs entrenched in this. They're really in all the CEOs that I've had the opportunity to work with. That is a real thing for them. What should I say? When should I say it? And it all is grounded
Interesting.
in high stakes moments. And what I've tried to teach in those moments is don't worry about what you said. You should worry about how it landed. That is the moment for you. It's okay. My story is that I think, well, how did it land? What did people
Yeah.
really hear versus what did you say?
Yeah. Yeah. And I thinking about like, yeah, you can get kind of calloused and worried about all the things that could happen, and then affects the authenticity, which then affects the inspiring followership. Those that can be kind of a negative loop there, for leaders to fall
Yeah,
into, I can imagine. So
very
um,
true. I mean, it's the hardest thing. And people don't say this enough. CEO is also a lonely job. CEOs have,
absolutely.
it's hard to be a CEO, to
Yeah.
be out there. And you're right, you can get quite isolated and to find your authentic moment. That's why I think great communication teams, they thrive. Your
Yeah.
communications person often is the right hand of the CEO. I'm
Yeah.
just pushing a different way of scaling that. And I think
Yeah.
storytelling from an authentic place, grounded in your experience, grounded in
Yeah.
what you've gone through, I don't know how you can go wrong with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, these skills could be useful for any level of leader. Like you said in your intro, you've developed talent at all levels. So, but of course, you have to think about prioritization, in terms of, how do you decide like where to invest talent development resources? Do you go wide? Do you go deep? What do you do? So, how do you decide where to focus, this effort inside these organizations?
Yeah, it goes back to what we said in the very beginning of our discussion today, which is first principles thinking. It's asking that provocative question.
Yeah.
Which roles in the organization create disproportionate value?
Hmm.
That is the question. What are those roles? If you don't answer that, then every learning and investment you make is equally justifiable. It's like,
Sure.
well, every
Sure.
investment we can equally justify because we really haven't asked the question of which roles drive the most value. I've
Yeah.
had the opportunity to lead initiatives that have taken 4,000 roles, identify the top 100 of those who drive unmistakable value to the top 80 that drove outsized value.
Yeah.
Then from there, Sam, we created this what we call a role health check, which is
Okay.
super. Now, a role health check often starts with the simple questions that most of us can answer. Well, is it hard to fill, Brian? Does it have a succession to it? But the questions I started to ask and have the team ask, which is, okay, what's the decision rights in that role? That's a whole different question. What is the silo spanning expectation of that role? How does it need to work
Yeah.
across? That is a different question. All in service of can we get very clear about prioritizing roles that really push us, and therefore we can put the development within those roles as well. It forces tremendously a partnership with talent development and talent management. There's where you see the natural meshing point, but it also changes the conversation. We're no longer talking about should this program be mandatory or should it be like highly recommended? You're
Right.
really talking about, okay, how are we driving return on investment?
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so for the learning leaders out there, um, you know, how do you, what's your advice to them to help, accelerate development of people in these critical roles? Like any practical tips that you can think of from your experience?
Yeah, the acceleration within these roles, two things happen. Um, First, it's changing the language. Um, And I would also say it's your entry point into the conversation. If you really want to get into how do I really affect that role and
Yeah.
develop that role, I
Yeah.
believe the entry point should be the CFO for sure and the business leader.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
one of those things that I often ask learning leaders when I talk with learning executives. I would go, "When's the last time you had a meeting with the CFO?" And it's
Hmm.
rare that I hear, "Oh, what do you mean, Brian?" Well, the CFO. When's the last time you've asked the CFO which roles, if they had, and here's the development, here's the question, if that role had 10x,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
10x type of work, would move the needle in what you're trying to deliver,
Right.
what would that do for you? And
Yep.
that is that role velocity mapping that
Yep.
I believe is super powerful.
Yep.
And it gets the conversation to turn into Okay, now we're talking about criticality, value creation. What I also say is strategic initiative mapping. Every company has map the initiatives to
Yep.
the role. The role then becomes there's a person in it. And as we say, Sam, then you develop the person. Okay, do I need to develop the person from a exposure? They don't have enough
Hmm.
exposure to the rest of the business. Do I need to
Hmm.
develop them through experiences? Well,
Hmm.
they need to do a P&L experience, Brian. Or to
Yeah.
your point, it could be a pure skill. They just don't know the deep parts of how legal works in Russia. So
Yep.
you go,
Yep.
okay,
Yep.
we just got to get
But-
how it works in Russia. Now, you and I would say, can he just pull AI and go, hey, here are the legal remedies? But I go, that's how I think of the development.
Yeah.
I often go, well, there's an exposure that all leaders need. They need an exposure either to certain parts of a business, to other leaders, and they need experience. They need some sort of experience that says they haven't really experienced a down time in the business or an uptime or limited resources. So that's the way
Yep.
to think about it.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So we've covered some great ground. We've talked about experience architecture, role velocity, some of these critical skills like inspiring followership and so on. You have been working, with CEOs and CHROs inside organizations, and now you've stepped out and are leading your own organization,
Yeah.
Win with Talent. So you're bringing them along. So tell us about what you're doing in your new organization.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm still new to this, but I'm having a blast. The first thing I'm realizing is when with talent is really anchored in the ability to kind of navigate these inflection points. I think the company is really good at performance inflection points more than anything else.
Yep.
And what that means to me is that's across transformation, culture, leadership, and technology for sure. But what I'm trying to do is close this gap between the talent agenda and
Yep.
business value. That is
Yep.
probably, in simplest
Yep.
words, what I'm here to do. Now that looks like, hey, I'm definitely business first and the company's business first. We have deep accountability because I'm an operator at heart. It better be practical. There's the next thing. It's
Yep.
got to be a
Yep.
practical execution of what we do. And the last part is it has to have velocity. It's velocity with purpose. We move
Yep.
towards things. So that is the grounding of the business for sure.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Last question for you. So if we're, again, our chief learning officer, maybe a CHRO, a learning leader out there listening right
Yeah.
now, maybe they've been investing heavily in skills. Maybe they were starting to wonder if they're solving for the right thing. Whatever it is, like what's your number one piece of advice to a learning leader today?
Optimizing for experiences and readiness.
Okay.
And here's let me quickly just unpack that shortly. I think experiences are just they're business magic. It's how the business talks.
Yeah.
The business doesn't go, Sam, tell me Sam's Excel skill and his PowerPoint skill. The business
Yeah.
goes, tell me how Sam has grown his business,
Yeah.
and how's he done that, globally. That
Yeah.
that is the magic. So for me, it's doing that. It's getting learning leaders and CHROs to embrace that
Yeah.
moment and run towards it. Because if you do it right, the question that will be asked of leaders in the room is this. We think across this company and all that it's about to go through in its next challenge, who's been tested enough to get us there? And
Yeah.
there's where you go as a leader because we all have challenges. But you ask the question, who's been tested enough to be trusted to get us through it? Now,
Yeah.
you design for that and everything else follows.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. That's the perfect place to end. As one of my favorite podcasters, Ezra Klein likes to say, that's we're good. We're right there. That's it.
Good.
So Brian, thank you so much for joining. Really, really love this conversation. I knew it was going to be great coming into it and did not disappoint. So if our listeners want to follow you or learn more about your work, Win with Talent, where should they find you? How should they connect with you?
Yeah, you can direct message me on LinkedIn, please
Okay.
do. And then
Okay.
the website is in stealth, but it's up and running. It's www.winwithtalent.com. Real easy.
Awesome. Awesome. So, listeners, if this episode was useful, inspired you, please, my ask is share it with at least one person. Could be in your organization, could be outside your organization. That's the way we spread the word. You could follow Being Intrepid on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Leave a rating. It helps others find us. And until next time, stay curious, chart your own course, and keep on learning. Thanks, everybody.